Imagine for a moment that you are sitting quietly in your room. Nothing dramatic is happening around you. And yet, inside your mind, an entire story is unfolding. You replay a conversation that never happened. You imagine a future argument. You picture yourself becoming wildly successful or completely humiliated. You create scenes, dialogues, outcomes. None of them are real, and yet your heart responds as if they are. This is the psychology of people who imagine fake scenarios. First, let us clarify something important. Imagining scenarios is not abnormal. In fact, it is deeply human. The human brain is not designed merely to react to reality. It is designed to simulate it. Neuroscientists have shown that the same brain regions that activate when we experience something real also activate when we vividly imagine it. When you picture an argument, your stress hormones can rise. When you imagine success, dopamine may increase. The brain does not fully distinguish between actual experience and detailed mental simulation. This ability evolved for survival. Our ancestors who could imagine danger before it happened were more prepared to avoid it. The capacity to mentally rehearse the future helped humans plan, strategize, and innovate. In moderation, this ability is a gift. But there is a difference between healthy imagination and compulsive fabrication of fake scenarios. Healthy imagination is flexible and purposeful. It serves creativity, planning, empathy. Compulsive scenario building, however, often stems from anxiety, insecurity, unresolved trauma, or unmet emotional needs. Over time, what began as a protective mental rehearsal can become a mental habit. The brain loves repetition. The more a person imagines certain types of scenarios, especially emotionally intense ones, the stronger those neural pathways become. Eventually, the mind begins to default to imagined realities instead of engaging with the present. Let us explore what this behavior reveals about a person. When someone frequently imagines worst-case scenarios, such as rejection, failure, betrayal, or humiliation, it often indicates hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is a heightened state of threat detection. It is common in individuals who grew up in unpredictable environments. If a child learned that safety was fragile or approval was conditional, their brain may have adapted by constantly scanning for danger. As adults, they might imagine arguments before a simple conversation, or assume abandonment before a minor conflict. Their fake scenarios are not random. They are protective simulations designed to prevent emotional pain. Psychologically, this reveals underlying anxiety and a deep fear of losing control. On the other hand, some people imagine grand success, admiration, and dramatic recognition. They picture themselves delivering powerful speeches, gaining fame, or finally proving everyone wrong. When this happens occasionally, it reflects ambition and creative drive. But when it becomes excessive and disconnected from action, it may signal unmet validation needs. Perhaps this person did not feel seen or acknowledged in their formative years. The mind compensates by creating an internal stage where they are finally valued. The fake scenario becomes a self-soothing mechanism. It temporarily fills an emotional gap. Consider body language. A person deeply engaged in imagined scenarios may display subtle outward signs. Their gaze might drift away during conversations. Their facial expressions may change slightly in response to internal dialogue rather than external events. They might rehearse conversations under their breath or show micro-expressions of anger or excitement when nothing in the environment justifies it. This suggests their cognitive energy is directed inward. It is not necessarily arrogance or disinterest. Often it is cognitive overload. The mind is busy negotiating an internal story. Now consider the opposite. If a person rarely imagines future conflicts or outcomes, it may indicate high emotional regulation and present moment awareness. They may possess secure attachment patterns, meaning they trust relationships and do not constantly anticipate threat. Their lack of excessive mental simulation can signal confidence and psychological safety. However, in some cases, a total absence of future imagination might reflect impulsivity or poor planning. Everything in psychology exists on a spectrum. The behavior itself is not the issue. The intensity, frequency, and function are what matter. People who imagine fake romantic scenarios often reveal attachment dynamics. Someone who imagines deep emotional connections before a relationship has developed may struggle with anxious attachment. They might idealize someone quickly, constructing an entire future in their mind. When reality fails to match the fantasy, disappointment feels catastrophic. Their emotional system reacts as if something real was lost, even though the relationship existed primarily in imagination. This creates a cycle of longing and heartbreak that is internally generated. In social settings, scenario builders may overanalyze small interactions. A delayed text message becomes a full narrative of rejection. A neutral facial expression becomes evidence of dislike. These individuals often engage in mind reading, a cognitive distortion where they assume they know what others are thinking. Their imagined scenarios feel convincing because the brain seeks coherence. Once a narrative begins, confirmation bias takes over. They selectively notice information that supports the imagined story and ignore contradictory evidence. Psychologically, this reveals insecurity and fear of uncertainty. The human brain prefers a painful story over no story at all because uncertainty feels unsafe. Decision-making patterns are also influenced. A person who constantly imagines negative outcomes may avoid taking risks. They might decline opportunities because they have already mentally lived through failure. Their body has already felt the embarrassment, the criticism, the loss. To them, it feels real. Avoidance becomes self-protection. Over time, this can lead to stagnation, regret, and lowered self-esteem. Ironically, the very mechanism designed to protect them from pain begins to create it. Emotionally, fake scenario thinking can intensify feelings that have no external trigger. Someone may feel anger after imagining an argument that never occurred. They may feel jealousy after picturing betrayal without evidence. They may feel sadness after replaying a hypothetical breakup. Their emotional state becomes disconnected from objective reality, but deeply connected to internal imagery. This can confuse relationships because partners or friends may sense tension without understanding its source. The individual might struggle to explain why they feel hurt because the hurt originated in imagination. Let us discuss subconscious action. The brain encodes imagined experiences similarly to real memories. If a person repeatedly imagines being criticized, their body may adopt defensive posture in real conversations. Their tone might become guarded. They may preemptively defend themselves against attacks that no one has made. Observers might interpret this as aggression or insecurity. From a psychological perspective, it is anticipatory defense. The mind has already simulated the threat. When a person does not engage in such anticipatory rehearsal, it often indicates trust in their coping ability. They believe that even if something negative happens, they can handle it in real time. This reflects self-efficacy. Self-efficacy reduces the need for constant mental rehearsal because the individual trusts their adaptive capacity. However, not all fake scenario imagination is rooted in fear. Some individuals use fantasy as emotional escape. If daily life feels monotonous, overwhelming, or unfulfilling, the mind creates an alternative reality. This can be harmless daydreaming, but in extreme cases, it can resemble maladaptive daydreaming, a condition where immersive fantasy interferes with functioning. These individuals may spend hours constructing elaborate inner worlds. The psychological driver is often unmet needs for excitement, control, or emotional connection. The fantasy world becomes predictable and safe. Real life, by contrast, feels chaotic. Over time, excessive scenario imagination can have psychological side effects. Chronic anxiety is one of them. When the mind repeatedly rehearses danger, the nervous system remains activated. Cortisol levels may remain elevated. Sleep can become disrupted because bedtime invites unstructured thinking. Rumination replaces rest. The person may appear physically exhausted but mentally overstimulated. Self-esteem can also erode. If a person constantly imagines failure, their internal narrative becomes self-critical. They may internalize imagined criticism as if it were real feedback. Conversely, if someone lives primarily in grandiose fantasy without grounding in action, they may experience cognitive dissonance when reality does not match imagination. This gap between fantasy self and real self can create shame. Relationships often suffer. A partner who frequently imagines betrayal may become suspicious without evidence. A friend who imagines being excluded may withdraw prematurely. These behaviors can create self-fulfilling prophecies. The imagined scenario subtly shapes behavior, and behavior influences outcome. The mind, in trying to prevent rejection, may unintentionally provoke distance. Productivity is affected as well. Mental energy is finite. Hours spent rehearsing hypothetical conversations or fantasizing about future achievements are hours not invested in present tasks. This does not mean imagination is wasted. It becomes problematic only when it replaces action. The brain receives emotional reward from imagining success, which can reduce motivation to pursue it. Dopamine is released during vivid anticipation, sometimes decreasing the drive to engage in effortful behavior. Now let us consider how psychologists analyze this behavior. A trained psychologist does not simply ask, "Do you daydream?" Instead, they observe patterns. They listen for cognitive distortions, such as catastrophizing, mind reading, or fortune-telling. They notice emotional triggers. Does the person begin imagining negative scenarios after minor uncertainty? Do fantasies intensify after social rejection? They examine attachment history, childhood environment, trauma exposure, and coping mechanisms. Cognitive behavioral analysis might involve identifying the automatic thought that initiates the scenario. For example, a delayed reply triggers the thought, "They are losing interest." That thought generates an imagined argument. The imagined argument creates anxiety. The anxiety drives reassurance-seeking behavior. By mapping this sequence, the psychologist helps the individual see the pattern. Body language is also observed. Does the person appear tense when discussing hypothetical outcomes? Do they smile subtly when describing grand fantasies? Are their eyes focused inward as if watching a movie? These microsignals provide insight into emotional investment in imagined scenarios. Therapists also explore the function of the fantasy. Is it protection, escape, validation, rehearsal, or avoidance? Understanding function is key. If the function is protection from anxiety, therapy may focus on building tolerance for uncertainty. If the function is unmet validation needs, therapy may address core self-worth. If the function is trauma processing, deeper trauma-informed work may be required. One of the most powerful realizations for individuals who frequently imagine fake scenarios is understanding that the mind is not the enemy. The mind is attempting to help. It is overworking. It is trying to anticipate, prevent, or compensate. But without conscious awareness, the strategy becomes maladaptive. In daily life, awareness changes everything. When someone notices, "I am imagining an argument that has not happened," they create cognitive distance. This is called metacognition, thinking about thinking. With practice, individuals can choose whether to continue the scenario or return to present reality. This does not eliminate imagination. It regulates it. As we reflect on this topic, we must remember that imagination is the same faculty that creates art, innovation, empathy, and planning. The difference between empowerment and suffering lies in control. When you guide imagination, it becomes vision. When imagination guides you unconsciously, it becomes anxiety or escape. The psychology of people who imagine fake scenarios reveals something deeply human, a desire for certainty, safety, recognition, and control. It shows how the brain tries to protect us from pain and move us toward pleasure. It exposes our fears of rejection, our longing for validation, and our discomfort with uncertainty. And it reminds us that the stories we tell ourselves, even when invisible, shape our emotions, relationships, and choices. If you recognize yourself in this pattern, do not judge yourself. Instead, become curious. Ask yourself what your mind is trying to protect you from. Ask what need the fantasy is fulfilling. Ask whether the scenario is preparing you or paralyzing you. With awareness, imagination can transform from a prison into a powerful tool. In the end, the most important scenario is not the one you imagine. It is the one you consciously create through action. The mind can simulate infinite futures, but only the present moment allows you to shape one. And when you learn to balance imagination with grounded reality, you discover that the greatest power of the human brain is not in escaping life, but in engaging it fully.